Well, what if you struggle with a permanent disability?
It's been my observation that there are at least three different types of people who appear what I would call super adequate, extremely self-sufficient. The first would be the highly intelligent, those with minds that are quick. There's a second category, and that would be the greatly gifted. You with artistic skills or athletic skills. You with the ability to handle yourself with creativity. The third would be the deeply religious. You seem to live in the realm of the ultra-holy, which gives off an air of sufficiency and a depth of spirituality that others rarely attain. I think Paul put it better than anyone in 1 Corinthians chapter 4, verse 7. What do you have that you did not receive? Or as the New Living Translation renders it, what do you have that God hasn't given you? A bright mind? You didn't give yourself that mind. You may have continued your education and cultivated it, but you didn't give yourself your great memory. God gave it to you. Here's a major question that arises in my mind and ours. How does God enable us to rely on His strength, even though we may be exceedingly capable in our strength? He reaches our pride through pain. And He uses the pain and the brokenness to replace the arrogance and the pride, to make us consciously dependent on Him. What we must understand is that God uses broken instruments to make incomparable music through life. All of this prepares us for the testimony of the great disabled Apostle Paul, and how rarely you will have that adjective connected to his name, though it's true, as it should be connected to your name and mine. We're all disabled in one way or another. Some more obvious to the naked eye than others, but we all deep within struggle with our own list of disabilities. If we knew that, and if we remembered that, we would never pedestalize a soul on this earth, for we would realize they too are fellow strugglers. Now, you talk about a classic example of highly intelligent, greatly gifted, and deeply religious. Is there one more so than the Apostle Paul himself? I can think of none more than he. To begin with, we read in 2 Corinthians 12, 1 through 4, as we put together a brief description of Paul as a man of this and a man of that. To begin with, he is a man of unsurpassed privileges. Verses 1 through 4. Look at the privileges. I was caught up in the third heaven 14 years ago. Whether in the body or out, I don't know. Only God knows. But I do know this. I was in that place of paradise. I heard things so astounding. I saw revelations so amazing. I cannot put them into words. For God revealed to me a plan that would unfold in the days ahead, tying in beautifully with what had happened in the past. I saw it all. It was all portrayed in front of me. Think about it. Don't rush ahead. Think about this. First of all, he has kept all of this to himself for 14 years. How many do you know, and we cannot name a one, who would be caught up into a third heaven and would be given revelations from God himself, who would keep that to himself for a day, to say nothing of 14 years? Which brings us the second. He was a man of uncommon humility. Verses 5 and 6. Not only a man of unsurpassed privileges, 1 to 4, verses 5 and 6, he is a man of uncommon humility. This bears close scrutiny. Don't just rush by these two verses. That experience is worth boasting about. He says that, as it were, in the flesh. It's something to be really proud of. But I'm not going to do that. I will boast only about my weaknesses. Oh, look at the vulnerability here. I could boast about my strength. You haven't seen God. You haven't seen God. You haven't been in paradise. You haven't heard what I've heard. But I will not boast about it. What kept him from doing that? That which 99% of the other part of the world would have done in a heartbeat, especially in this day of celebrity, which I tire of more every day I live. As I see it, I detest it. And I realize those beating their own breast have already forgotten that everything they have came from God, who gives them breath in their lungs and can snuff it out in a moment's time. Why didn't he take his story on the road? Why didn't he showboat his sainthood? Look at the answer in verse 6. Look at it. If I wanted to boast, I would be no fool in doing so, because I'd be telling the truth. But I won't do it. Why, Paul? Why? Because I don't want anyone to give me credit beyond what they can see in my life or hear in my message. Isn't that great? I don't want anyone to think anything more than what they hear from me or literally see in my life. How on earth do you stay that uncommonly humble, having had that kind of unsurpassed experience? A disability is the answer. He calls his, look at it, a thorn in my flesh. 2 Corinthians chapter 12, verse 7. To keep me from becoming proud, he says it twice in the same verse, I was given a scallops tesarche. When I'm through, you'll understand why I call it a disability. But before spelling it out, let me define disability, because some of you think it is only a crippling disease or the results of such, or some paralysis, or some debilitating blindness. The word disable, according to Webster, means to deprive of capability, with such synonyms as cripple, immobilize, incapacitate. The core meaning, according to Webster, is to render powerless. I was rendered powerless, we would say of Paul, by infliction of a severe affliction or injury or damage. Paul calls it a scallops, and appears nowhere else in all the Bible. Nowhere else. Only here. And it isn't an ethereal thorn, it is a thorn in the flesh, in the body. Interesting facts I discovered in my research. Walter Bauer helps us by telling us that it represents anything sharp or pointed. The word is really stake. It's translated thorn in most Bibles, but it's the word for a sharp pointed stake that would be used to impale a body, a form of brutal crucifixion. A body would be impaled on a tall, sharp stake. Something that causes serious annoyance, writes Bauer. The lack of detail makes it impossible for there to be a truly scientific analysis of Paul's scallops tesarche. Whatever it was, it resulted in debilitating pain that remained with him throughout those 14 previous years and from then on. He lived with this pain. What was that pain like? A.T. Robertson, the great Baptist scholar, writes, certainly it was some physical malady that persisted. All sorts of theories are held. Malaria, eye trouble, epilepsy, migraine. Another source, William Barclay, writes, the very word stake indicates an almost savage pain. The whole picture before us is one of physical suffering, such as a certain virulent fever. One who suffered from it describes the headache that accompanies it as being like a red-hot bar thrust through the forehead. Another speaks of the grinding, boring pain in one's temple like the dentist's drill. When the thing became acute, it reached the extreme point of human endurance. And don't miss his additional comment said in apposition, it was a messenger of Satan. Look at that. Angela Satana, an angel of Satana, a messenger, a demon, who took it as his opportunity to bring Paul down. R.C.H. Lenski, the great Lutheran theologian, writes, the verb is rare, translated torment. In it we have the idea of blows that are struck with a closed fist. Blows struck with a fist, derived from the word for knuckles, referring to blows that sting and crush. Lenski renders it to fisticuff me. I was given a stake in the flesh to pound me black and blue. Those blows struck Paul with inhuman power, like an implacable demon who assaults a mere mortal with hellish glee. If that doesn't describe a disability, I don't know what does. Some of you know what that's like. Oh, it's not the same pain. It's a deep pain that you can't even put into words as you try to go on with your life. As for one who is intellectually sharp and greatly gifted and spiritually deep as Paul, those blows reduced him to putty in the Lord's hands. Twice we read, to keep me from becoming proud. It's as if God was saying this, here is one servant of mine, conceit will not ruin. Here is a man who will never be arrogant. He had been, as a Pharisee, you know his background. But now he is reduced to prayer. Look at verse 8. Three different times I begged the Lord. I begged the Lord to take it away. So let's include this in his resume. He is a man of inescapable pain. Verses 7 and 8. A man of inescapable pain. Or you could write excruciating. It's hard to spell, but it's the same as inescapable. He is living with this excruciating pain, so much so that he prays and he prays and he prays. First time and only time you'll read Paul praying 3 times, and God with the same answer. I parakaleo God. I called on him. I summoned his aid. I called for help. Maybe it went something like this. Oh Lord, I plead with you. Remove this. He answered, no, my son. No, I will not remove it. Lord, I come again, maybe several days later. I come again, broken and at wit's end. I beg of you, take away this excruciating agony. I can't take it anymore. I will not. It is yours to bear from here on. My answer remains the same, no. Oh God, my Father, maybe a week later. My Father, I come yet again to you for relief. Please, 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 remove the stake. For the third and last time, Paul, no. Now a cynic hears that and thinks right away of how cruel God is. If you think that, it shows how shallow you are. You don't understand that God is too good to be cruel. His plan is too great ever to torture anyone. He doesn't torture. Humans torture humans. But God's plan is profound. He knows what it takes. He knows what he's dealing with. Because of what God says, we know it wasn't cruelty. Each time Look at the verse. Verse 9. Each time he said, my grace is all you need. My power works best in weakness. No, Paul, my grace is all you need. My power works best in weakness. No, Paul, my grace is all you need. My power works best in weakness. No, Paul, my grace is all you need. My power works best in weakness. Claim it. Cling to it. Walk in it. Be clothed by it. Stand firm on it. My power is brought to completion in your weakness, my son. Learn this. Learn this. You will never again be proud of your intellect or your giftedness or your depth of spiritual understanding. So verses 9 and 10, we see Paul as a man of paradoxical power. Paradoxical power. Track with me here. Paul must have thought, I finally got it. I finally got it. I never learned it from the rabbis when I was in school. I never learned it from the applause of my fellow Pharisees, from my peers. I never learned it when I achieved my goals and my dreams, but I've learned it from the stake. I've learned in the brokenness and the pain. That which I begged the Lord to take away, I've learned to accept it. Eugene Peterson does a masterful work on this section in his work called The Message. And I quote, because of the extravagance of those revelations, and so I wouldn't get a big head, I was given the gift of a handicap to keep me in constant touch with my limitations. Satan's angel did his best to get me down. What he in fact did was push me to my knees. No danger then of walking around high and mighty. At first I didn't think of it as a gift. And I begged God to remove it 3 times. I did that. So what did Paul learn? Look at the paradoxical power that appears. Each time I learned His grace is sufficient for me. His power works best not in my strength, but in my weakness. So look carefully. Now I'm glad to boast about my weaknesses so the power of Christ can work through me. He would have never said that as a Pharisee. He would have never said that when he was walking in the flesh without Christ. But now, 14 years after the stake has found its residence in him and he lives with it, he says, now I've got it. I understand it. In fact, now I gladly boast about my weaknesses. That's why I can take pleasure in my weaknesses and in the insults and hardships and persecutions and troubles that I suffer for Christ. For when I am weak, then I am strong. I get it now.
Living with disabilities. We all have them in one way or another. I hope all you guys are going to do good today. So I hope and pray in Jesus' name. Amen.